Welcome to the Robotics Week opening dinner, and I'm glad that I see many faces here which I know and a few faces which I don't know yet, but I don't want to talk too long because I think after this intensive part in the town hall, in the Rathaus, and after seeing the exciting exhibition between the Romans and the thing, we deserve a meal, right? So we should go for a meal, but we would start with a slight presentation. I think you can already have your bread and butter here, but we would start with a presentation by one of our platinum sponsors. And this is from ABB, Mr. Stephen Wyatt, and he will give us an impression on what to expect, and he can tell best how ABB sees the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I would start by saying that it's a pleasure to be here in Augsburg tonight. As a Scot, one of whose forefathers, Mr. John Knox, for those of you that remember far back, he was an important guy in Scotland in the Reformation. It seems particularly apt to be here tonight to say a few words about what I refer to as the robot Reformation that's taking place some 500 years later. So actually, there's never been a more important time for the conversations that will take place in the coming days as part of European Robotics Week. I would also like to take the opportunity to underline the importance of this event, which brings together all the people who have a stake in the future of robotics, industry experts, the workforce of tomorrow, policymakers, and the academic community. You know, much use is made of the word ecosystem these days, but actually nothing is more critical than the European ecosystem of people that European Robotics Week is helping to build. Because without these people, Europe in general, and robotics in particular, will not prosper. Now, the first time that I heard the word robot was actually used on a popular TV show when I was growing up in Scotland in the 70s. So for those of you that are old enough to remember, at that time, a rather famous Italian car company, need to be a little bit careful with the Italians in the room tonight, they were launching a car which was called the Fiat 131. And the idea was that it was rather high-tech and rather sporty. But one of the Scottish presenters on this program, they were a little bit naughty. They twisted a little bit the advertising campaign, and they referred to it as designed by computer, built by robot, and driven by idiots. I still haven't figured out if they were actually referring to Scottish people or Italian people, but that was actually the first time that I heard the word robot. Now, fortunately, things have moved on a little bit since the 70s. And for me personally today, I think there are 3 reasons that I'd like to share over the next few minutes with you why it's such a great time to be working in robotics. Number 1 is it's one of the world's most rapidly developing businesses and the center of attention of much of the world's investment community. Number 2, the technology is absolutely fascinating, and the robots of today are able to do some really cool and sexy stuff. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, robots are actually making a very important contribution to society, not just to industry, both here in Europe and all around the world as well. So if I start a little bit with my first point, which is that robotics business today is moving at breathtaking speed. So for those of us, again, that are old enough to remember, actually the modern industrial robotic era began some 4 decades ago when ABB, the company that I worked for, introduced the first commercially available microprocessor-controlled robot in 1974. Now, if you fast forward to today, the industry has actually enjoyed an average growth rate of 19% a year over the last decade, numbers that very few other industries in the world can lay claim to. And to put this growth into perspective, in 2015, there were a little over 2.5 million industrial robots actually in operation in the world. And yet last year alone in 2017, there were nearly 400,000 robots sold. So the acceleration of the robotic industry continues unabated. Now, why are robots experiencing such phenomenal growth, you may ask yourself? Well, In my opinion, it's a combination of factors, including society, technology, and the markets themselves. And it's also the fact that all of these forces are converging at the same time. We are in effect all living through a real tipping point for the world that goes far beyond just the industry in which we work. If you look at society, the way we work is also really changing. We have many countries that face a demographic time bomb, where large parts of the population are aging and nearing retirement. And many young people do not want jobs which are dangerous, delicate, dirty, or dull, or the 4 Ds, as I often like to refer to them. And this is especially true for millennials, who grew up in a digital world and want rewarding mental challenges, not rewarding physical challenges. Companies themselves are therefore increasingly turning to robots to offset labor shortages for everything from manufacturing smartphones to handling thousands of packages a day at an Amazon-type fulfillment center. And from a labor market perspective, robots are a win-win proposition. Manufacturers are more productive and able to grow, and people have safer and more interesting jobs. Now, from a technology perspective, all of us experience the benefits of the Internet of Things every day through a device that everyone in this room probably has either in their pocket or in their handbag, right? This thing here. The same level of utility and efficiency is also taking place in factories, albeit on a little bit more of a sophisticated scale. And actually using a term that was coined from right here in Germany, the fourth industrial revolution, or Industrie 4.0. And on the topic of Germany, we have an example here from my Mercedes of how some of that is something that actually is touching things that you do in everyday life and the normal things that you do before you even get to the office. So today, however, robots and many other machines are part of one digital ecosystem, and this is allowing factories to do things that they've never been able to do before. By connecting devices such as robots and machines to sensors and cameras, we can generate a lot of data that is processed through enabling technologies such as cloud computing and artificial intelligence, or so-called machine learning. We are already starting to see the benefits of this, such as robots which can predict their own mechanical faults, or software that allows us to build an assembly line in the virtual world without disrupting the current factory production. Unfortunately, the concept of machine learning has not yet reached my GPS, which insisted that I'd taken a wrong turn at Lindau on the way here, and then proceeded to tell me for the next 15 minutes that I should go back before I finally had to turn it off. So technology is good, but it's not always perfect, right? Now, the final area of change is probably the biggest one of all, namely today's markets. Ever since factories were created, they were designed to make large quantities of the same items for a very, very long time. Today, in almost all industries, we see a change towards making smaller lots of more diverse products and for much shorter cycles. We call this mass customization, and it affects everything from cars to the foods we buy and our personal electronics. And all of you in this room, by the way, are responsible for this phenomenon, right? Because typically everyone in this room does not want to have the same thing as the person they're sitting next to. And this puts manufacturers under much greater pressure to be more flexible, accommodating more diverse products and packaging from the same production lines, launching new products faster, and doing both while maintaining productivity, efficiency, and quality. Many tried and tested production systems that served industry well in the past are simply no longer agile enough, and many manufacturers are now struggling to keep up with the pace of change in the market. So if I move on to my second point, robot technology is fascinating. So here in Europe, if I talk about the company ABB that I work for, our robots have reached outside of factories to capture the imagination of the public. They've met world leaders. They've starred in television commercials. They've given out postcards in London and Paris's premier department stores, Harrods and Galeries Lafayette. And they've even helped the DJ to launch the new Ford Fiesta, the example that you can actually see in this particular slide here. So the impact of robots in society is also being explored through the performing arts, where technology is helping to break many boundaries. Last year, Yumi conducted an orchestra in Pisa during a live performance by Andrea Bocelli. Using so-called lead-through programming, the conductor, who had no prior experience in industrial robots, learned how to program the complex and intricate movements in just a few days. We also recently participated in a unique dance event by a Swedish choreographer called Fredrik Rudman, who performed a delicate duet with a 900-kilogram ABB industrial robot. The active interaction between dancer and robot was made possible by a software product that we call SafeMove 2, which controls a robot's speed, movements, and position, so people can safely coexist around active robots. Now, on a more lighter note, this is actually the first time that my wife has ever taken an interest in anything that I do. Because having danced with me for 30 years and having her feet stood on and finding out that I'm always in the wrong position at the wrong time, finally she found out there was an alternative. She just didn't know about it because she didn't pay attention to robots. So on a more serious note, in a factory setting, this software makes it possible for people and robots to safely interact in sporadic and unpredictable ways, which in the past could only be accommodated by shutting the robot down. And to my third point, which is the important contribution of robots and robotics to society. I think the positive impact of investments in automation on local economies is quite well documented, at least to many of the people in this room. We have countries with the highest robot density, including here in Germany, as well as in Japan and South Korea, that have among the lowest unemployment rates. Countries that invested more in robots lost fewer manufacturing jobs than those that did not. And more specifically, the International Federation of Robotics, of which some of us in this room are active members, estimates that automation has driven a net increase of over 10 million jobs in the so-called EU27 in the previous decade alone. So not only is there plenty of evidence that robots help create jobs, but they typically create better and higher paying jobs. Actually, the most robotics-intensive manufacturing sectors, they employ about 20% more engineers and nearly twice as many installation and maintenance workers. And they pay higher wages. And if I can be allowed to take an example from here in Germany, the roughly 25% of cars that are produced by Volkswagen in Germany last year, as opposed to those that were produced in Volkswagen plants in so-called lower-cost countries, is often cited as an example of how robotic automation can help countries to stay competitive. If we compare how this has evolved over time with, for example, French automotive companies, who last year made about 10% of their overall car production in France, we can see that being an early adopter of robotic automation has actually stood Volkswagen in rather good stead. Robotics is also rather important because it gives people safer and more rewarding jobs. There is no longer a need for people to do the dangerous, delicate, dirty, or dull tasks that often entail them spending their days in frozen meat lockers or high up on warehouse shelves or in some of the processed food factories that you can see in this slide. This means that they can focus on more rewarding cognitive or mental challenges instead of on less stimulating physical ones. Of course, the adoption of robotics and digital technologies in general is going to lead to changes in the way we work. Studies by Germany's VDMA, the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs, and the Boston Consulting Group all predict a significant increase in job profiles that combine production, process, and operation skills with digital fluency and the ability to work with so-called big data. In the future, my own company ABB sees a tremendous need for people with robotic skills, including engineering jobs, but also hands-on manufacturing workers who are quote-unquote fluent in robotics speak. Some of these jobs, however, they will not even be invented for years to come. And a case in point here is the example of the introduction of the personal computer. I'm reassured that some of the people in this room are old enough to remember when that probably happened, and it actually ended up creating 1,500 completely new job titles. So just imagine what we might need in robotics a decade from now. So all of this leads us to two important closing questions. One, what do we as a robotics industry need to do to attract the best talent and be more successful here in Europe? And what do we as a robotics industry expect from others in order to be more successful here in Europe? So on the first question, I think that we need to make sure that we're preparing our workforce for attractive and rewarding careers in this digital world. The EU Commission has published some data which suggests that Europe could face a shortage of up to 900,000 skilled information and communication technology workers already by the year 2020. In a VDMA survey, the majority of German manufacturers felt it was easier to train production specialists in IT or digital skills than the other way around. Yet only 22% of the companies in this survey expected the employer to provide training for digital and smart manufacturing skills. They expected other people like academia, higher education, and the government to provide these things. So I would say that clearly there are some training gaps that need to be filled, and rather quickly, if we're to find the skilled people needed to sustain the growth of our industry. We as an industry also need to continue making robots that are even easier to use. Because in the future, many robot users, they will not be technical experts. They will be factory floor workers and service personnel. And in addition, there will be many new companies. The 99% of companies that are small, medium enterprises that make up most continents' infrastructure or industrial infrastructure that look to use a robot for the first time. And these companies, they will not have the luxury of dedicated robotics personnel to handle all the technical aspects of robots. I think it's also important that we don't underestimate the importance of communications. Making robots simpler also means demystifying our technology for people who are not scientists, but they are key stakeholders in the robotics dialogue. And we need to find a common way to explain jargon-filled and complex topics like artificial intelligence and machine learning to a mix of people who all speak their own language, public dignitaries, IT experts, R&D scientists, etc. So my second question, what support do we need from others? Well, as a marketing and sales guy, this list tends to be very long, but I'll try to keep it relatively short. I think if you look at all of the countries around the world who are leading the fourth industrial revolution and have a globally competitive manufacturing base, the one common element is that all of them have a clear national strategy and active state-sponsored initiatives to drive technologies like robotics. And we need this to continue in Europe as well. We also need to recognize that although we have a lot of robotics know-how here in Europe, the rapid market growth in Asia, as well as the reindustrialization of the Americas, means that much of our talent is a target for Asian and American companies with money to invest. And this is obviously a potential threat to our industry in Europe as well. So as well as providing incentives, it's also important that policymakers don't put up barriers to promising technologies. A good example of this are the inconsistent safety standards on emerging technologies and solutions like collaborative robots. So to give an example, today we're allowed to drive at 30 kilometers an hour down a street where just a few meters away, children are walking. Yet some requirements would have collaborative robots placed behind safety fences, away from skilled and experienced factory workers. Now, of course, we must never compromise on safety, particularly where children are concerned. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're not legislating all the benefits of new technologies away with unduly restrictive policies that don't reflect the actual risks. Additionally, we need to have consistent application of regulations within the same country. Here in Germany, for example, the same request for industrial certification in two different federal states often results in two rather different answers. And this is not particularly constructive and not very helpful. In this respect, it's very encouraging, however, to see that in the same Germany, Angela Merkel's cabinet recently held a retreat to discuss Germany's digitalization strategy, and that Chancellor Chief Helge Braun wants to see policies that support research areas like artificial intelligence and encourage more entrepreneurial startups, while at the same time placing less emphasis on regulation. So this is the kind of environment in which our industry can prosper, and this is definitely something which is constructive and helpful. So lastly, ABB's view is that it will take close cooperation and collaboration between policymakers, industry, and our educational institutions to make sure workers have the right skills for tomorrow. Governments can help to create policy incentives to encourage corporate investment and training, and should focus resources on training for skills for which demand is forecast, and in industries in which the country or region demonstrates competitive advantage. Employers must accommodate lifelong learning processes and support reskilling for their future manufacturing needs. based on the reality that an education today in a worker's early 20s will no longer last their entire career. That's not the world we live in anymore. And last but not least, education systems must adapt to match workforce supply to skills demand more effectively. The key here is enhanced collaboration between industry and higher education institutes to understand the major trends and the skill requirements needed to support them. So on this note of enhanced collaboration between public dignitaries, industry, academia, and tomorrow's workforce, this European ecosystem of people that is a prerequisite for success, I would like to conclude and thank you for allowing ABB the privilege of sponsoring this event. I would strongly recommend that everybody enjoy what I refer to as the Robot Reformation, and please enjoy also the rest of European Robotics Week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you. So I think most of you are hungry after a long day, and we will start now with the starter. However, this is not only a fun evening, you also should take the opportunity to use the tables here for discussion. And I would propose simply 3 topics of discussion. You can choose whether you want to discuss all of them or just one of them. And as you can see, we provided some paper and pencils here. And I would really be happy if each table could discuss a few things and come back after the main course with just 3 bullet points per table to report back what some conclusions might be. And now I would place the 3 discussion topics. One is how to stimulate the innovation in Europe. Second one would be how to reach the young generation to go into STEM subjects. And the third one is what can we do to collaborate more here and what kind of expertise is needed. So once again, the innovation, the kids, and the stimulation of what we need. These are the 3 topics. Just feel free to discuss here, and then please enjoy the thing. And we, after the starter course, we will have a second presentation by Wilfried Eberhard. Thank you. We come to the next speech of the evening. Again, a very short speech, just between the starter and the main course. And yeah, it's from someone who is not only also with our second platinum sponsor in addition to ABB, our first platinum sponsor, but he's also someone from an association environment, but he will tell later about this a bit more. And I'm very curious to see what collaboration 4.0 means. Please, Wilfried Eberhard.
Yes, it's a long week, a long day, so I'm the last speaker, and I make it quick. My name is Wilfried Eberhard, and thank you for the introduction. And I have 3 jobs here. One job is I'm working for KUKA since 32 years. It was never boring. It's always fun, also tonight, together with you. I'm in the VDMA since a couple of weeks, head of robotic and automation. And I'm, until end of November, the head of the association in Brussels. And so I will introduce you a little bit about robotic of KUKA. No, I don't do that. I talk about collaboration 4.0. So collaboration, what's that? Collaboration is the key word for today's challenges and for the future. So we are talking about robotics and the future of digital society. And the world is changing, and the changing world needs new answers. And it's nothing new, by the way. KUKA was always shaping and pushing these developments and adapting itself. And we are 120 years old, as you can see, and I will introduce it a little bit with a short movie.
Every company needs people with visions. Because before every innovation, there's a vision.
We have the courage to change. In the 120 years of our history, we have always reinvented ourselves.
Today, our products and solutions make life easier for people in factories around the world.
We are pioneers. We shape social and industrial change.
We are made in Germany and globally successful. The secret of our success, our orange thinking.
We are one of the world's leading automation experts. We combine tradition and innovation.
For 120 years now,
We are KUKA.
Yeah, you have seen that KUKA was always reinventing itself over the years. That's why we survived even difficult times. And the key issue and the key thing was change and innovation. And always coupled with a process knowledge, and it's part of our DNA. So 120 years ago, we started with acetylene production here in Augsburg. There was also the base, and later on, we didn't know that at this time, for robotic and automation. So acetylene is still a very important gas for welding, for robots. But the robot was not the key issue at this time. It came later. The robots we invented close to ABB, I think you said 73, with, at this time I think it was ASEA. We have had already the name KUKA at this time, 73, 74, with the first robot, the Famulus. It was done by people with skills and the will to innovate things and to make new things and to risk new things. And that's still our DNA. Nowadays, we have roughly 14,000 people all over the world. And they are driving the intelligent automation, and they shape the so-called Industry 4.0, and we call it also the Industrial Intelligence 4.0. And now we are at the so-called at the threshold of the fourth industrial revolution. The digital and the physical world are merging, growing together. And that changes everything. And that's a huge opportunity. So far, the roles were pretty clear. Germany makes machines, mechanical engineering, world class. USA makes IT, and China is the workbench to produce everything. But now, with the new situation, we have a complete reblending of the cards, international competition. So the roles are new. The increasing complexity of this new situation in the world with new competitors needs, sorry, that's a little problem here, requires completely new approaches. And one thing is the title of my presentation and the speech is collaboration and cooperation. You can use it technically with the cobots, but also the collaboration between humans within a company, but even more between competitors, partly competitors, and universities and the industry and different levels. So, what is the important change? That's the network. Connected Society 4.0 is the connected life and work, a constant exchange. We're always exchanging things. Industry 4.0, we are connecting everything. We generate data, and we are not doing it alone. Otherwise, we cannot handle these complexity, and it's very expensive in new technologies. So, cooperation and networking offers more than free competition for a company today. So it makes no sense to be only a competitor. So that's why we need to exchange and cooperate all over Europe. So let me say some words to Europe. I was this week participating in Berlin at the Süddeutsche Wirtschaftsgipfel, and Angela Merkel was talking about Europe. And she was reinforcing the European idea that we're here in Europe together since now 70 years in freedom. So it's more than economy, it's about economy, but it's also values we share together, and we have to work for that, we have to fight for that in nowadays time. And let's do that. You know, we have a very good setup already. We have United, European Association. We have EU Robotics. I look to you, Bernd, and the team. And we have the European Robotics Week here in Augsburg, in a very old city. And working with partners from research is the key thing for the long-term success of our industry and also for the success of KUKA. For example, KUKA works with about 80 partners throughout Europe. And especially the cooperation, the tight cooperation between industry and research is very, very important. And we have to transfer the knowledge very quickly. And the job of a company like KUKA is, like ABB, is that we transfer it into real products, into the market, and innovation at the end is if we have it in the market. Yes, it's an ambitious agenda, but in this rapid development in the world, we need that. And because we have a fundamentally change of our life and industry. Give me some examples. What are the changes? We are changing from possessing, or before competition only, we are changing from possessing to pay-per-use. You might say, I don't know if it's something for the industry. Yes, it is. In the production world, we have pay-per-use models, and we have new models like manufacturing as a service. We have a setup in Munich together with new partners from the insurance field, like Munich Re, and a consulting company, Porsche Consulting, where we really start with complete new approaches. So also in the industry where we are possessing not anymore the key issue. Coming back a little bit to technology and to KUKA, it stands for the collaboration between humans and robots. And the key word is the robot is an assistant and helps the aging society of aging people with less skills and less power to work on a high level for a long time. And the other topic is that with a robot, the robot is a helper, is not the key element, that's still the human. So in all our things we are doing, also in regards to artificial intelligence, humans are in the center of everything, and we have to work for that. And the robot is always helping us to do a better job, helping the society, and that's key. Yeah, we need responses to the demographic change. Where is the connection to robots and to our topic? I think a lot. We need automation for the healthiness of professionals. We need the assistance for monitors and dangerous tasks. We have to compensate the skill shortage, and all of that can be done with intelligent automation. Think about logistics support in hospitals. For example, also the distribution of the pills and the medicine in a hospital can be done better with automation and more safely. So this is, a key issue that people getting older in a society in Europe, but also in China, and robots are not yet there where they should be. It's a huge field of completely new robots, but the basics we have already in place. We have to put that together. So flexibility is a key issue, easy to use, safety. In order to achieve that, we have to put in artificial intelligence that we get to this multifunctional assistance, like today's smartphone. We are already starting to do that at KUKA, and I'm sure also at ABB and Comau and other companies who are today with us. On the left side, you see the project Carla, which is a recharging robot for electro e-mobility. We have done that, or we do that together with VW, so we need also the partnership. We don't do it alone. We're recharging cars automatically, or we have shown in April in Hanover, and recently also in Berlin this week, a concept of a robot for the home. We are not at the serial production. It's a prototype, and it's a concept study. But you can see this machine brings everybody to smile. Also, our German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, and our boss, Dr. Till Reuter, who is watching that. Yes, the future field, service robotics, is not yet really started with a huge potential for Europe. And coming to the end, I want to speed up because I think you're still hungry and good stuff is waiting for you. But let me finish and put together. So the key thing is we have to create new forms of partnerships, also with competitors. We can be partly competitors. We have to work together like humans and robots. Also in our businesses, we need cooperation, for sure with rules. And industry and research, they have to work together as tight as possible to meet the new challenges of the future. And let's shape this collaboration 4.0 for a successful European future. Thank you very much.